Hello, everyone, and welcome to our tenant protection launch here in Ventura. Thank you so much for joining us in Facebook, Instagram, and any platform that you may be in, YouTube. Um, we are here today to talk about a little bit about tenant protections. I'm a policy advocate at Cause, and we will have some great speakers lined up today to talk about our community and who will talk about really about the realities about being tenants in the city of Ventura. Joining me today is my co-host for the evening, Alex Garcia, and she is the Cause community organizer for the city of Ventura. And, before we get started, I do want to address the question that many people do ask us at some point is why do we need tenant protections in Ventura? And I do think that there is a lot of people who simply don't understand the realities that are happening in the city of Ventura right now. And if we look around, the answer is all around us. It's become increasingly hard for working class families and specifically families of color, Latino families, to afford to live in Ventura. Rent has become so unaffordable, specifically in the last few years, that a person who's working and who's working full time at a low income, especially if they're a minimum income, they would have to have at least 3 full-time jobs at minimum wage to be able to afford whatever's on rent right now in Ventura. Specifically, right now we see that the wages aren't increasing as the same way that rents have been increasing, right? And the fact is that Ventura has gone through so much in these last years, not only in the 2008 depression, but then the Thomas fire that destroyed hundreds of homes. And now the pandemic, it's just been hit over and over again with these crises. And at every single point, whether it's the 2008 depression, whether it's the Thomas fire, or now the pandemic, landlords, and especially large corporate landlords specifically, have continued to raise rents. And so we are here to bring awareness. Alex now is going to talk a little bit about why the community has come and what we've heard from the community, really.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Alex Garcia. I'm the community organizer here in Ventura with Cause, and I've been with this organization for 3 years, and I've had the privilege to get to talk to a lot of community members in those 3 years. And that's really where this campaign started, right? It was very much grassroots when we would be phone banking, when we'd be canvassing, talking to people on the doors about, what the issues they saw as tenants. And so I'm going to just share some of the things that a lot of people have been sharing over the years, over the last 3 years. And some things like we know, right? Like it's like living multiple families to a home, right? We have people that don't have a proper room, and people are sleeping on the floor or on the couch. Also, we heard a lot of folks not wanting to ask for repairs, also for fear of rent increases or evictions. And then other sacrifices that people have had to do is rent out a room in their apartment. Also really sad but harsh reality is like people are also having to hide how many children they have when they're applying for an apartment. And then in some occasions we've heard from people that have paid rent in cash, and that was used to evict them, right? Because there was like no paper trails of that payment. And then right now, right, we're seeing this urgency with the pandemic, like everyone that, had to stop working has gone through their savings completely, right? Like people don't have savings right now. And that's what the folks that had any, right? The people that didn't are in debt. If it's not credit card debt, it's asking from loans from family and friends. And then also, because of this pandemic and it's tragic, like we've had a lot of death in our community, and folks have lost loved ones that, they were contributing to their families' rent And so now they've had all these expenses with the funerals and stuff. Not to mention, we've heard from a lot of parents about when their kids were going to school remotely, increased utility bills, increased spending on food. And so, yeah, all these things are, the community has been bringing them up consistently. And so we're, glad to be able to finally, launch this campaign. And yeah, we're here. And I'm excited to keep moving forward with this campaign.
Thank you. And I just wanted to talk about a little bit too about what are some of the existing protections that we do have now. The state of California has been really pioneering state in terms of tenant protections, but as Alex has mentioned before, people during the pandemic have suffered so much. They've lost basically all of their life savings, and some of them had to continue working even when their health was at risk and they were at risk and still are of contracting COVID. And so, as we know, there is an eviction moratorium. And this eviction moratorium was for non-payment of rent only. So it's a little bit confusing when people, call you and they're like, well, I didn't know I could get evicted at this point. Well, you can in some cases. It doesn't cover all eviction cases. So there's many families and many tenants who have been evicted during this pandemic and who still continue to be evicted because of things like owner move-ins, because of things like, their houses going on sale. And so families who have had to vacate these premises have the right for a relocation assistance right now for only 1 month's rent. And the landlord can just waive the last month rent. So for a family who's out there and who's trying to find a rental in Ventura, which takes months to find, they have to survive with only that little bit of money, that little bit of savings. So what we're trying to say is that these existing protections aren't enough. Same thing with rental increases, right? Right now, you could have a rent increase of 9% in the city of Ventura, which is way more than $100. It's like around $150. That's almost $200, depending on what your rent is. So these rent increases are just not enough to protect the tenants who are suffering today. And with that, I would like to then call up our first speaker. Our first speaker is a community member here in the west side of Ventura. I think everyone knows her pretty well, so I will go ahead and welcome Liz Campos.
Hello. I know that most of you know me, Liz Campos. I'm here today to talk about my own experience and what I've seen among many, many West Side people who are being de facto evicted by the sales of their homes. 5 months ago, my landlord told me that he decided, since the market is so wonderful and he can use the money, he's selling the home I live in. And I have not been able to find housing, in part because I'm in a wheelchair with a spinal cord injury, so I can't just jump up and walk up the stairs and see what owners have to offer. And I have some unique disabilities that make it even harder. But what's most compelling to me is the number of single mothers with children who are getting rejected for the same housing units that I am, because none of us have enough income to pay the doubled and tripled rent that is also occurring as a result of the pandemic. Ventura is becoming, because of the lack of a just cause ordinance and the lack of really solid renter protections, a city of elites and a city that is going to be without essential workers. I see down the road, if everybody who is willing to work hard and work more than one job or take on the risks of a pandemic has to leave Ventura because we don't have housing, it's going to be a very difficult city for other people to live in. I'm into my 5th month, and My landlord originally gave me a 90-day notice, and I was able, because of my disability, to get it extended. Most people don't have that luxury. But I'm also out of money now. It costs so much to pay fees to apply for an apartment that I have no resources left. A just cause ordinance that would give someone 2 or 3 months of rent would solve that problem. We also need our housing elements written so that all levels of income are inclusive. We need inclusionary housing and a solid rent ordinance. We also need tenants to work together. I know I see so many people over and over again applying for units. If we all get together, we may be able to allow the city council and the people in power to hear our voice and make the changes that are necessary. I'm facing eviction pretty quick. My landlord is just kind of holding off until the rule change happens in September, even though I'm not one of the people protected by the eviction moratorium. He's waiting. But at that moment, it's going to be that much harder for anyone to find housing. I think we're going to be flooded. So what I'd like to say to everybody today who has any power or authority in this, please listen carefully to people who say they need help. Please listen carefully when your constituents come to you and say it's time for an ordinance that protects tenants. And for those of you who are going through this like I am, be strong and organize, and let's all go talk to the city and go talk to the county as many times as we have to make sure they hear our voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Lesia. That was a really, really powerful statement that you made. And definitely we need to stand together to make a difference. And now Alex will actually introduce one of our council members. Oh, Alex, your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you so much, Liz. Yeah, so now our second speaker unfortunately couldn't be here live with us, but Mayor Sofia Rubalcaba did share a video that she would like for us to play, and it has a message about this campaign. So let's show that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sofia Rubalcaba. I'm the mayor for the city of Ventura. Cause invited me to join the social media launch of the Renter Protection Campaign in Ventura. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this really important issue. We understand that affordability has become a big issue. It's gotten pretty expensive to rent here in the city, and there are real negative impacts of displacement when people can no longer afford to live here. Ventura has recently attracted national attention as a hotspot for rising rents. A lot of renters are seeing rent increases of $100 or more annually. We know that this is a big issue for families with children, workers that earn minimum wage, people with special needs, domestic workers, and working class people in general. Many of these people are longtime residents who have lived in Ventura for decades. And now, due to a lot of the issues combined with the pandemic, they are struggling more than ever to keep up with the rising cost of housing. We understand that if the situation is not addressed, we will likely see a dramatic rise in homelessness and people living out of their cars or on the streets. When people have to look for housing in more affordable cities, they start driving longer distances to get to work or do the things that they have to do. So that impacts everyone. People spend more time in traffic, so it increases air pollution, and ultimately it affects climate change. So this is why we must take action to support renters in our city. This is something we are taking seriously, and we understand the need to create protections for our renters, given that renters are about 50% of our residents here in Ventura. So that means that we need to take care of our residents, families, and our essential workers so that they are able to stay here in our community. And we need to work together to make this a priority. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for the work that you all are doing.
And thank you, Mayor Sofia Rubalcaba. Now I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is actually someone who grew up here in the city of Ventura and actually still lives here. And he is a small landlord. So Matt Bello is a small landlord in Ventura. And so he's going to talk to us a little bit about what he thinks about tenant protections as well.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew Bello. I grew up in Ventura. My parents were renters for much of our when I was a young kid, and they were fortunate enough to buy a home in Ventura when homes were about $150,000, and obviously that's not the case anymore. When I went off to college and as a young teacher, I remember the anxieties of being a tenant. I studied here in California and saw skyrocketing rents and often lived with the reality that I would eventually be evicted because I was studying in the Bay Area. And I eventually was evicted in the Bay Area. The landlord was able to double my rent, making me unable to remain in my property. And I remember that even though I was fortunate enough to move back down home and purchase a home in Ventura and a home that has a granny flat, I still remember those anxieties of being a tenant, and I look at the reality of what it's like to live in coastal California, where laissez-faire capitalism is able to do whatever they want with the residential market, and it's making people suffer. And now that I've been a landlord for a while, and I always heard, the perspectives of landlords, I could say that I have had to replace water heaters and paint places and replace faucets and all of those things. And yes, those cost money, but I think that a rent control based on CPI, again, Consumer Price Index, the one of our inflation measures, is very reasonable. And I think that the cheapest rent now in Ventura, let's just say it's $1,500. That still allows the landlord to raise the rent $45 each year. And most landlords that I know, like me, we don't even really raise the rent because we acknowledge that our tenants are helping us to pay our mortgages, and I think that these protections would really go after people who are in investment entities, large banks. Those are the people that are really speculating on our property more. People that aren't from our community and don't have to face the people who they dole out injustice to. So I'm very much in favor of tenant protections as well. If a person trashes my place or has some other major issues, I'm still protected as a landlord, even with tenant with due process to evict that person. I don't lose that power. The only power I lose is on just evictions, where I'm just doing it for no good reason, and I'm okay with that personally. So with that said, I really I want to support this campaign. I see people like Liz and others losing their place all over our neighborhood right now, and it really pains me. And I see the increased rent prices, and I know that many of these people don't have to do that, but they're able to do that because of the lack of regulation. And we need a certain amount of reasonable regulation right now that allows people to even if they have a high mortgage to fix their properties, but not necessarily completely rip people off. So anyway, thank you guys so much, and I'm here to support the campaign.
Thank you, Matt. And yeah, I think it's important to point out, Matt, what you said earlier about the fact that we're not going for small landlords. We're really here trying to address what has been the problem in the market, which is like this seeing home and seeing houses as a commodity rather than a right? And so they come in, they buy the properties, they remodel them, then rent it out to people and then kick them out when somebody else has a higher bid for the rent. So these protections will really go far into stopping that process. And again, it's multi-million-dollar companies. And now Alex will also introduce our next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker will be Lori Brown, Councilmember Lori Brown, and she also couldn't be here with us today, but she also sent a video, and she shares a little bit about her experience also as a renter.
Hi, my name is Lori Brown, City Council Member, City of Ventura. Thank you for inviting me. I count it a privilege to be here with you today. I was a renter for 20 plus years in the City of Ventura, and I understand the challenges that come with renting and interfacing with property management companies and property owners. It can be confusing, it can be complicated. The uncertainties that come with leasing a unit from a private owner or corporation can be a source of extreme anxiety, especially when you don't know how much longer you can afford the rent, or the rent increases, or when you receive threat letters for not being home during an inspection because you were at work, or because you're categorized as a high-risk family because you have one child or multiple children. Believe me, I've been there. Or for insisting that your toilet or plumbing be fixed because it's broken and it's the only bathroom in the entire house and it's not getting repaired in a timely fashion, but you're worried about how that will affect you, or insisting that black mold be properly handled and removed, or for complaining about water damage in a ceiling that shorted out the electricity and the conditions are unsafe. And that's all we're asking, right? Decent living that we can be afforded as residents in the city of Ventura. And I think the crux of the issue is housing a right, or is housing investment and the market against people? And I think the city council does a good job of creating policy for the whole entire city. And I speak for myself when I say that I would like to try to find the best solution for all, for both sides. As chair of the Housing Opportunities Proactive Engagement and Solutions Committee, otherwise known as the Hope and Solutions Committee, I invited one of your own, Maria Navarro, to make a presentation about Just Cause. And we also invited representatives from the real estate community to tell us more about AB 1482, which is the state law that embodies a lot of what Cause is asking for. And I want to just go out and say it. Housing and rental protections is a complicated issue. I mean, it really is. There will be no easy answer, but advocacy like yours is what's important to help push the narrative for policymakers and legislators like me and my colleagues. So I want to just say that, having said that, I support the city looking further into Just Cause and identifying more information about AB 1482 and the effects that it would have on the city, and continuing this full discussion. In the meantime, I want to say, keep raising your voice, continue to fight, and I will continue to be there for you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're really grateful. We were able to get that video from Councilmember Lori, and we definitely will continue this fight. We will definitely continue advocating for our communities, no matter what. So, yeah, I think our next speaker is going to be introduced by Maria.
Yeah. And so next speaker is someone actually really, really involved into the tenant protection movement here in Ventura, but also in Oxnard. I had the pleasure to meet him earlier this year. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Ian Gamble, who is a member of the Ventura Tenants Union, otherwise known as VTU. Thanks, Ian.
Hi, everyone. I just want to kind of start off by noting the absurdity of charging people rent on the stolen land of the first peoples of the so-called United States, and to continue to extract value out of something that is not only not yours, but something that was violently taken from the people, whose culture is vastly older than yours, is the height of immorality. I'd like to just quote Adam Smith really quick, who you all might know as the father of capitalism. Landlord's right has its origin in robbery. The landlords, like all other men, love to reap where they have never sown and demand a rent even for the natural produce of the earth. I was watching a meeting from the City of Ventura's Hope and Solutions, which you just heard Lori talk about, on the just cause eviction protections. And I was kind of astounded by the amount of lies and misrepresentation about the tenant protections that the real estate people just put out there. And it really reminded me of the campaign for Proposition 10, which was the removal of Costa-Hawkins, in which the real estate, lobby were just, it was just like lies on top of lies. It was absurd. The real estate lobby is powerful, and they got that power mainly through lies and deceit. I want to urge the council members who are hopefully tuning into this forum to be wary of what real estate interests tell you. They only care about profits with little regard for the people their profits rely on. Now I want to talk a little bit more about what the tenants union, how we kind of view the current situation, and hopefully that'll give you all a better impression of what Ventura Tenants Union is all about. The mission is, specifically is to build a movement for housing justice through empowerment-based education, outreach, leadership development, organizing, and advocacy. We are an autonomous organization created in direct response to a global pandemic that has exposed the unjust housing policies and practices pushed for and enacted by landlords and other apathetic officials. The tenants union's work is grounded in the strong conviction that tenants must be the leaders of the efforts to transform our community's housing conditions. VTU embraces the values of equality, hope, tenant leadership, respect, direct action, civil courage, racial and economic justice, and self-determination in our work. The tenants union believes that housing is at the center of all of our struggles. Treating housing as a human right instead of a commodity would go a long way towards curing many of our social problems. As tenants, we recognize that while landlords express their power through money, through lobbying politicians at all levels or becoming politicians themselves, we tenants express our power through solidarity and organization with one another. We aren't NIMBYs who decry all development to preserve the power and status that we already have, nor are we YIMBYs who advocate for development with little regard to the histories of the targeted communities. We want equitable development that lifts our neighbors up while creating safer, more affordable neighborhoods. Luxury apartments do no favors for anyone, except the investment companies that own them. Smaller landlords see what those apartments go for and want a piece of that money, raising rents and pricing out long-term community members. If you think there's a labor shortage now, just wait until the workers you rely on for that burger you enjoy are forced to move to cheaper areas just to survive. We are often told just to move, as if we can't afford to live here. But what we, the workers, are what really makes Ventura. We work at the boutiques, the coffee shops, the restaurants. We're the artists, the nurses, the bartenders. The Ventura that is hyped up in Sunset Magazine would cease to exist without us. Ventura's character is not the luxury apartments or the commuters that live in them, but work in Santa Barbara or LA, who can afford the $3,500 or more per month in rent that the newly built coastline apartments charge. Evictions ultimately are a form of violence, and often when people are victims of violence, they reproduce that violence on their community. A study just came out of Philadelphia that correlates evictions with higher crime rates. It's hard to imagine that Philly is an outlier in this. Some will say that we need to combat this rise in crime with more policing, and which ultimately is just more violence. But again, we reply that the solution is in the housing issue. Housing gets a fraction of the funding that the police get, yet housing is central to reducing crime. People that are squeezed by low wages and high rents become desperate, and desperation often leads to so-called antisocial behavior. The neighborhoods with lowest crime rates are always the ones that have the most resources. Health and housing are directly related. As we've heard tonight, a lot of families are forced by high rates, their rents and low wages to double or triple up in their housing. And we know that more than 10,000 deaths were due to evictions during this pandemic, which is, of course, not over. As you can see, how central housing is to everything we struggle with in this city. Affordable housing is virtually non-existent, but yet we continue to build. California has, despite the claims, seen a huge boon in housing construction, but only so-called market rate and luxury housing. I look it up. Jerry Brown led the charge in deregulating construction of housing but didn't include affordable housing in that. And then what happened? Rents continue to increase, and so does the population of unhoused. This is why you keep hearing that California has a 3 to 4 million unit deficit while also having 1 million empty units. The so-called housing crisis is in reality an affordability crisis. This is why we at the Ventura Tenants Union believe that stronger just cause protections as well as rent stabilization are critical. First and foremost, we need to keep our neighbors in their homes, but also it's time for the government that says they represent us to start representing our interests. Small landlords aren't, as one commenter at the Hope meeting said, landlords with 15 units. Small landlords have maybe an extra unit and work a day job. We need housing policy that treats us as humans instead of occupants in some investor's portfolio. These measures are just the first step in tipping the balance of power in this country back to where it should be, for and by the people who make it run. We believe that housing is a human right, and ultimately, our goal is to have tenant associations in every apartment complex and across every landlord's portfolio of properties. Even if your landlord isn't a slumlord, please reach out to us and get involved, or just start talking to your neighbors. It's going to take every single one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. That was really powerful, and I enjoyed everything that you said. You said so much, but I enjoyed every single second of it, especially when we talk about and acknowledge that this is stolen land, that this is a place where we've made this, system to actually put us down and continue to put us down at every single moment. And so thank you so much for, highlighting that and bringing it up here. And also to putting that, the organizing piece. Yeah, we need to speak up. We need to actually unite and come together to talk about it in, city council and different levels of government, because then nothing will happen. Nothing will be done if we don't organize. And so that's why your organization is so important in this movement. So thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much, Ian. We had one other speaker who was having tech difficulties. They have very unstable connection. And so, I can just briefly mention, not give her story for her, but I could just briefly mention, she's a community leader that considers Ventura her home, and unfortunately she's been displaced. And she's, has been trying, to come back to her community, which is Ventura City, and, has struggled for various reasons. But, this is at the core of why we're working on this, right? On this campaign. It's our community. It's like our people, right? That are facing these very tough choices. How do they continue to make this? They've already been making sacrifices, right, to be able to stay, and like with all the compounded things now, we need to protect, right, our community from greedy landlords and investment companies that are coming in, because the last thing we want, right, is for our community to be uprooted and have to leave their friends, neighbors, their schools. And really, this is really about prioritizing, right, like people over profit. Because like Matt mentioned, Ian mentioned, like landlords that will be affected are not going to be small landlords. They're going to be, corporate landlords, and they'll still be able to raise a rent. It's just what we're asking for is a reasonable amount that isn't going to cause somebody to have to leave, right? Because they can't afford that $150 rent increase. And who will this benefit the most, right? Is going to be our low income families, right? People with children, right? People that have 4 children. We know a leader with us has rents a 4-bedroom because she has a lot of kids, and she almost pays $3,000 a month. She pays $2,850 every month to be able to have space for her family, and that's not okay, right? That was a decision that like her landlord saw similar 4-bedroom prices and just decided to raise her rent to be, competitive or be like at the same level in terms of the market. And like her and her family have been struggling, to keep up with these payments. And so, people with very limited income are going to be the folks that are going to be benefiting from these renter protections, from rent stabilization, and from just cause eviction protections. And so, that's why we're asking why we're doing this. We're putting it out into the community to get support for this campaign. And then right now we have an action that folks can take, people who are watching on Facebook Live, to sign our petition that we currently have. And Maria can talk to us a little bit more about where to find it, but we really need, folks to start to show up for our community. And this is one way. When it comes to council, we'll also be needing support from everyone. So maybe we're going to put the link in the chat, in the comments section, and we'll also include it on the Facebook event and on our Facebook page. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Maria?
Yeah, I do. We will put the link in the chat in our comments section in a bit. But I do want to say that, well, first of all, thank you for everyone who talked. And actually some good news. I just got an email about if you all are housing advocates or have been following tenant protections, you probably know about AB 1487. This was a Tenant Protection Homeless Prevention Act, which is a bill that basically creates a statewide fund to provide education, outreach, legal representation to at-risk tenants for the purpose for preventing eviction. So this is actually really good news that's coming out from the state right now. And it just passed the Senate, and now we just need to push also Governor Newsom to sign the bill into law. So this is excellent news. And so I think this is all trying to say is that this is part of a movement. I think tenants are really waking up. And I know that a lot of it is because we've been pushed due to the pandemic. And so hopefully this is a great opportunity to come together as a community and fight for our rights and be able to talk to City Council, to sign the petition, to talk to City Council, and to organize with Ventura Tenants Union, with CAUSE, with whichever group, and hopefully have meaningful change happen in Ventura. And again, then I will close it off by saying thank you so much to all of you all who have been watching us, who have been commenting, and thank you to all of our speakers. We will keep you updated with anything more, and I will definitely post the link into the chat. So take a look at that. Thank you.